As everyone is taking their seats, I'll remind everyone we'll have questions for all our panelists at the end of this session, and then a brief reception thereafter. Let me again welcome our moderator, Mr. Hervé Houret. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we're going to talk to the future of our industry, actually, all these young people. Not so young for Eric, but I know Eric for many years. And he's a good person because now he's studying at NYU, but you know, he made some mistakes before he went to Cornell. But sorry, I love Cornell. But all four of them have had a great experience in their short career, and I'd like to ask them, each of them, to take maybe 3-4 minutes to present to us the various experiences they had. And when it comes to, I'd like to start with Eric. Eric is really focused on measuring, as someone said earlier. You know, if you don't measure, you don't manage. And I've used these measurements, and I just enjoy them very much. And I improved the operations of my hotels thanks to Eric's measurements. So, Eric, can you just talk to us about it?
Thank you. I can't take all the credit for it. I just told the story. But so for the past 3 years, I've been focused my consulting practice on specifically the issue that Constantine mentioned earlier of moving toward labeling and getting to performance data, or really the qualitative to the quantitative. And that's where the area where there's been a lot of opportunity. And I do this type of measurement and reporting services for some of the major hotel companies, and then for the industry at large. There's a movement now again toward understanding the impacts of products and services from carbon, energy, waste, and water. And what we're getting hit with in the hotel industry are specifically what was mentioned earlier, those companies looking to measure the impacts of their supply chain. And travel and tourism, hospitality is part of that supply chain. And so the real industry question now is, what is the carbon footprint of my hotel stay? What is the carbon footprint of my meeting? And so I've been tackling that question with the industry for a few years now. Got my start with Yvette, who hired me as my first client to do that, so I owe him a lot of credit. But that's really what we've been focusing on for the last 3 years now, and the industry's really come a long way, and really are moving toward the quantitative of getting beyond the CSR of we care, we're committed. Well, how much do you care? How much are you committed? If you have a wind power renewable energy certificate in your hotel, and it's for 10% of your energy, then what about the hotel down the street that has 100% energy? They care 10 times more. So those types of issues, really, as we start to understand the different impacts and so forth, are what I've been helping the industry work with in my projects. It's been a good experience.
Thanks, Eric. I'd like to turn maybe to Mathieu. Mathieu developed a great concept, which he called BEST, in food and beverage, and maybe you can explain it to us now. It's okay.
Food and good time. Okay, so at the École Hôtelière de Lausanne, we have a Student Social Responsibility Committee, which is a group of students looking for sustainable future in our industry. And we take action in school, such as Mobility Day, Awareness Day. We receive guest speaker, and we also create the best concept. It's not the best concept of the world, but this is the best index. Best is B, as biologic, which is organic in English. E, as équitable, which is fair trade. S, seasonal. And T, terroir, local. It's actually the 5th point of Mr. Beckley just before. This index put a score in a dish. This score is out of 10. So we implemented it in September 2010 in the curriculum of the first-year student of EHL, and also at the practical restaurant La Ferme, where they have to create a best menu. So the higher the score is, more best is the dish. You will understand everything by reading this paper. And even further, because EHL is very, very focused on sustainability, they even implemented at the food court since September 2011. So at the beginning, it was really a student project only for education, and now even the operation at EHL took this project and implemented it. So we're very, very proud of it.
This food court is a restaurant where you welcome outside customers.
We welcome outside customers even if our practical restaurant, but the food court is not run by students. It's run by professional cooks.
Thank you very much. Yvette, easy for me to remember. It's a French first name for originally Chinese person. But you've worked in you worked in the food and beverage area as well, in catering, I think. And could you tell us about your experience?
Sure. Last year, I was a sustainability intern for Newman's Catering. The firm has been existing in the Lower East Side for 25 years now, and it's a leading corporate, I guess, catering firm. The owner brought me on to initiate his sustainability, I guess, hopes and dreams. He felt like, it had been a personal goal for a long time, but just focusing on the business and being a small firm has overshadowed that goal. So he thought that last year was a good time to bring in extra help to kind of drive this personal goal he had for a long time. We worked with an external firm, Ricaurte Resources, the executive chef and the director of operations, to create a sustainability strategy by targeting, I guess, the key influencers in the company first, because Ricaurte Resources was really big on culture eating strategy. So if you can't get your staff and team on board, nothing will be implemented. So we created an entire organizational chart of the company and targeted the individuals who were the biggest influences in the company and worked with them to kind of spearhead these operational changes that we were about to implement.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. And then finally, Eric Duchamp, you've had some experience as well, but more in buildings, was that?
Yes.
In real estate?
Absolutely. So my focus is on existing buildings in the commercial sector. I am the manager of sustainability strategies at Cushman & Wakefield, a large global real estate services provider. And I also am a graduate student at NYU-SCPS Institute of Real Estate, where I'm a chair of the Center for the Sustainable Built Environment Student Alumni Committee. So focusing both on the academic with NYU and their portfolio and Cushman & Wakefield's portfolio of over 350 million square feet across the country. At Cushman, I work to develop and implement resources and programs towards what Yvette was saying, education and training opportunities for our employees to learn more about sustainable real estate and how they can affect change at the properties that they manage, and other programs such as energy, water, waste efficiency, benchmarking, tracking, LEED certification. At NYU, I'm working with the Green Buildings Campus Working Group to implement policies across the portfolio as well.
Very good, very good. And as Professor Contocosta was saying, you are the agents of change. All of you in the room, but as well those here on stage. And I'd like to ask you, maybe each of you, to answer two questions. What have you learned through this experience? And then what would you do differently if you were really in charge? You want to continue, maybe?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things that we do on an annual basis at Cushman & Wakefield is called our Environmental Challenge, and that empowers our property managers to apply for a competition based on energy, water, and waste benchmarking. These property managers implement low and no-cost improvements that they can go in and do themselves, that they learn about through our training programs, as well as target their clients to build capital improvement projects into their budgets to reduce their environmental consumption. And one of the things that we've learned is this can only take us so far, that tenants are a major factor in reducing energy, water, and waste. And the next step towards the point of what would I do and what we are doing in our 2012 program is bring in tenant engagement. And while that's very hard to quantify, it's a very important step to achieving greater energy efficiency in our buildings.
Yvette?
Sure. I think with the ubiquitous nature of this dialogue and issue, my main takeaway was that we need to think globally but act locally. Paul, the owner of Newman's Catering, he drove this initiative by starting internally with his own business, and then it's not really by coincidence, but he also sat on the board of education for the International Special Events Society, ISIS. And so with that personal goal, I helped him plan the first ISIS Sustainability Conference last spring. And he was able to reach out to his network in the entire New York metro area of meeting and events planners. And we created this forum where we connected them to vendors, local vendors, to start this dialogue and create a bigger network. When a planner is looking for a printer for their next invitation or brochure or whatnot, who to go to, create this database of sustainability, I guess, or environmentally conscious businesses that they could go to instead of the current businesses that they're using, perhaps, if they don't have, I guess, green objectives. Our major challenge with converting Paul's operations was, I guess, effectively marketing that enough to our clients. For example, if our client wants our wonderful asparagus salad all throughout the year, that's not necessarily possible if we're only using local and seasonal ingredients. So, I mean, I think he's still working on that. When I left, we never found a really clear solution or strategy to solve that issue, but that was the main challenge.
Did you find that you may have lost customers because of that?
No, because I guess we had to run the business, like the goal of running the business and maintaining that still overshadowed, his personal objective to green his company. So it was hard to persuade them to not go with the menu options that we wanted them to go with instead of, what they loved that we offered. But I think that's a marketing issue.
Mathieu, what did you learn through this experience?
So through the index best, I think what I've learned most is the cooperation with school. At the beginning, it was an idea, this index, the idea of SSR, and then with school we had a great cooperation to implement it. It took a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of meetings, and finally we have it in different outlets in school. So from the idea to the implementation, there is a long way, and we want to see even further and maybe implement it in our gastronomic restaurant, maybe one day even in our takeaway, and maybe in school, such as yours, NYU. Why not?
I'm going to ask if you have a plan to sort of expand as well to hotels or Switzerland or Europe.
For the moment, EHL was our cobaye for this index.
Guinea pig, yeah. Guinea pig.
Yeah. And now we see that people really like using it, really like also to get the information about the food they're eating, how sustainable is the food they're eating. And yes, of course, we plan to give the tool for the restaurant business, hotel and restaurant business, and other school. So, little message to NYU. If you want to implement it, we will be delighted to help you.
Would it Think Switzerland or Switzerland Think or Swiss Think? Eric?
When I first started, now actually almost 15 years ago, I was very passionate about sustainability and the issues. And I think what I've most learned throughout these years is really to approach that passion and go from feeling in my heart to thinking about it with my head. And that really is the lesson I've been able to learn, is that this needs to be approached methodically, needs to be approached strategically, and especially when you're talking about these issues to people who don't care, don't understand, don't really know, to get buy-in. Really, the issue is to think about this from some of the ways that will affect them, or that will be more logical. And so that's really the big lesson I've learned, is to approach it that way. And now you see so many more people are passionate about this. I was one of maybe 3 people back in school who really was interested in this, but now you see so many more students and people are interested, and you know, I think that as those people go forward as well, if I were in control, really, at any property, any restaurant, any operator, you have people who are passionate about this, whether it's the housekeeper who donates soaps to their local charity, whether it's the engineer who's making biodiesel in his kitchen, or, you know, and if it's a GM, then you have obviously great things that can be done. But the key then in an organization is to find those people who are passionate and give them the tools and the know-how to approach this with their heads and not just with their passion.
Right, and if I remember, you started a small company, a waste management company, with a friend of yours from right after school, right? Right after
school, yeah. Yeah, you started right after school.
And we were your first client in Washington?
First client for waste management, first client for reporting, so yeah.
I'd like to continue with you, maybe Eric, because now you started with the Willard, but now you're dealing with Marriott and Hyatt at a global level, and I'm very impressed and very pleased for you. But do you think that hotel companies are currently focused enough on corporate responsibility?
From past until today, I would say no, not enough, or not as successful as it could be. And there's really 2 reasons. One is, we talk about sort of the industry, and really the fragmentation of the hotel industry, at least in the United States, is one of the reasons why this is difficult. You have the owners, you have the operators, you have the franchisees. And changing something through this big industry is tough, because you want to retrofit, you need CapEx, you need the owners' buy-in. How many owners are there in a hotel company? Then you have the brand standards. How are you going to change polystyrene in all of your hotels when you already have a centralized system for distribution and purchasing? So the fragmentation of the industry and that sort of mammoth way that you need to wade through it is really one of the difficulties that would happen. But the other one then is really not approaching it as a business issue and not asking the right questions. We've been stuck for years on this, will the guest pay more? But that's not even what's driving this now. And there's so many more questions. And really the question overall should be, how do I drive value for my business for this? How do I get new customers? How do I keep customers satisfied? How do I mitigate risks? How do I make everybody happy? You know, those are some of the things. So I think that now companies are really starting to realize, just as others have, that you can drive value for your businesses. And so that's when it really starts turning heads.
I think that there are a certain amount of hotel companies out there that are doing the right thing, and you walk into your hotel room and you see the sign there that says conserve water, help us by not requiring us to change your linens, help us by putting your towel on the rack. But I think that where this issue lies and is going to lies in the high-end hotels as well, where it's harder to put those signs up and harder to have your high-end clientele not want to throw their towel on the floor and have it washed every day. So I think there's a little bit of a bifurcation in the hotel industry where you're going to see the lower ends moving towards it because they realize the cost savings. They don't mind putting that sign up in the hotel to ask their occupants and visitors to stay and do that, and the high end is going to have to catch up to that a little bit and be a little bit more creative as to how to implement those solutions.
Very good. I'd like to ask a final question to this panel, and again, I'd like you to tell us what's your takeaway from the first panel. What did you hear and learn and really appreciated knowing? Maybe Yvette or Mathieu? We start with Mathieu.
Come back to me.
We've heard a lot of great things today. What I will take away is that we need to continue our effort, and as said Monsieur Bigley, we think a lot, but we do much less. So we need to keep striving, continuing, and making it better and better. That's it.
I mean, just reiterating the point that countries can either take the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach resonated with me very well, because I mean, it's true that China and India are seen as the bad guys, the polluters. Their population is growing so quickly, they're consuming everything in the world. But I mean, looking within ourselves, I don't think we're angels, like Mr. Bigley said. So that resonated because often we're caught up in pinpointing others, flaws in what they're doing. But I think the change has to start with a strategy that can apply to, us first and what we can do to better ourselves, and then look externally.
Thank you. Yeah. Eric, any comment?
Sure. I think my main takeaway comes from what you started with, which is the triple bottom line, people, profit, planet, and what we heard through the conversation about social equity, about large commercial LEED buildings being built in these large international cities while there's slums on the outside. With profit, how to value green, and whether it comes through a green premium out in the market or a brown discount, if you will, which is where I think actually it'd probably be going, and seeing the value of buildings that aren't considered green not appreciate with their green counterparts. And planet, the entire discussion was about how do we make our planet more sustainable for the future generations. We heard a number of great ideas there, and just seeing what folks like you in the room and folks like us up here in the panel are doing on all three of those levels, but hopefully targeting specific issues, because you can think holistically, and it's great to think like that, but unless you kind of pinpoint a specific issue, mine right now is benchmarking and metrics at Cushman & Wakefield and getting that data out there to make decisions from. So I'm pulling from here. Yeah, absolutely. Those are my main takeaways, is focus on something that you're really passionate about. Think holistically and focus specifically.
Eric, to conclude?
Two takeaways that I heard, hypocrisy and water. So I think the certain level of hypocrisy that we all sort of live with is one to deal with. There's hypocrisy we know about and that we don't know about. So again, and everything we do, there's ways we can always be a little more sustainable. A sustainable hospitality meeting, you probably wouldn't want to have bottled water, because in a green meeting nowadays, standard practice is not to have bottled water.
They have green cups, I noticed as well, and they have fair trade.
Right. But again, you take a picture of this and
defend NYU here.
Take a picture of the panel with bottled water, and then somebody says, "Oh, it's a so there's those kind of things." But the other is really, yeah, hide that.
No, but I mean, you're in waste management, and this one, first of all, has a smaller cap, so let's.
Smaller cap. It's got a little curve to it, a little groove.
Yeah. And I'm on the back of my waste management company because we recycle a lot. And he told me actually recently that in New York State, it's much better to use any type of plastic, whether it's recyclable or not, than glass. Because they have no way of recycling glass in New York State.
Right, unless you reuse the glass. Or
Unless
the plastic is PVC or polystyrene. But anyway.
We can start another discussion.
But then and the water issue, I think, is interesting, because as we sort of understand the metrics and the relations, again, carbon is one, but water is maybe more important. And one thing I think that is a really interesting one I've learned is the embedded water or virtual water of actually food products. And the amount of water it takes to make beef, to make chocolate. And so you start to say, understand these different impacts of when you measure things from all aspects of the supply chain in our lives, and you say, well, we can reuse the towels in the guest room, but is it 10 times better to get rid of beef in the restaurant than to save on towel reuse? So those are the kind of things that once we start understanding the impacts, I think we're going to be able to make more rational decisions as consumers.
We'd have a fun conclusion, but when you think about the water that beef consume and then the methane that they provoke, that's not good for the environment, right?
And the deforestation.
Well, thank you very much. A great discussion. Thank you. And we're going to start the Q&A session, but before we start, I would like to ask one of the attendees here, John Paulson, who is here, who is Vice President of Tishman. And Tishman is the company which owns one of our two hotels here in New York, the New York Times Square property, Intercontinental New York Times Square. And we could go on and on and on in the previous panel discussion, about ownership. And I must say I've been very, very impressed by the approach that Tishman has. And actually, this hotel will be a LEED certified pretty soon. It's just a matter of administrative issues. John, if you don't mind to just give us a very broad approach from Tishman, from an owner's perspective. And John is a professor here at NYU as well.
We have an interesting perspective. There was a lot of comments about ownership and management and being involved. I'm very fortunate to work with Tishman Hotel Corporation, which is a privately held company, but The principal in the company is Dan Tishman with Tishman Construction. Tishman Construction is one of the largest lead building organizations in the world, biggest construction companies. They do a lot of lead buildings here in the city, and it's always been a very strong and passionate part of the Tishman organization. And I was mentioning to Hervé before that Dan was actually an ecology major in school before he wound up going into the family construction business, and it's very important to him. He's also the chairman of the National Resource Defense Council as well. So he's always incorporated that aspect of sustainability and caring about the environment into an industry that really doesn't always take that into consideration. We also own the Westin Times Square, which we put up it opened in 2002. That building, while not being LEED certified back then, it wasn't really the big issue or the big angle as it is today. So at the time, we didn't even pursue that type of certification. But as Hervé mentioned, with the Intercontinental Times Square, from the very beginning, we knew we wanted this to be a LEED certified building. To us, it makes a lot of sense on the sustainability aspect because it does speak to bottom line profitability. If you can make the building more efficient, from an energy perspective, you're going to save a lot of money. One of the things I think we've noticed in this building from the Westin Times Square, even though that building is only 10 years old, the efficiencies and improvements that have been made in the 10-year span of time have greatly increased. Just the curtain wall itself, I think, is probably 20 to 30% more efficient. There's less sound transference that comes from noise outside, which is important in an urban environment like New York. The rooms are very quiet, even on the low floors, where there's a lot of sound that obviously leaks at the Westin from time to time, but also that translates into energy, being able to save on heating and cooling and those type of situations. We also, with our consultant, we did a lot of energy credits. We looked to try and put in sensors, motion detectors in all the areas that we could. We look to do a lot of different things from a sustainability perspective, and we also encourage Intercontinental to do what they can, and they've been very good at doing things like composting and recycling wherever we can. So I think from that perspective, we always encourage that in all our hotels, because for us, it does make sense that from an owner's perspective, we would want to encourage the sustainability. I also had the privilege of going through the master's program here at NYU and working on a paper for my applied research class that focused on sustainability. So for me, it was also an important part of what I do as a manager. I was a manager for years before going into the ownership side. But I was looking for a way to help quantify how I could help reduce costs for the hotel. Things like bulk purchasing of amenities, those little bottles that we throw away and use all the time. They drive me crazy. I mean, can we find a better way to do it? So I think the challenge for the students that are just getting out and going into the world is going to be, how do you make that become the focus of what happens in the next generation? This generation is great at things like technology and iPods and making things important. One of the things I also heard was about how do you measure things? And because you can't always measure the sustainability improvements, you don't always see it. Owners don't always get it. Some owners don't get it. I think we get it, and I'm hoping a lot of other owners get it. But I think that the challenge is how do you put that idea of you can save and you can make money as being an important part of what you do as a business. So
Thank you.
if you could just wanted to share that, thank you for letting me.
Well, no, thanks, John. And again, we really appreciate on our side, this relationship this partnership with Tishman. Actually, just two very quick points because that's one of my issues as a GM. How can I make sure that my owners understand that sustainability is actually good? It's really to be focused on ROI. You have to really present projects which have an ROI. They're all focused on short term, and we heard that earlier. You're right. But as well, we're lucky to have owners who look at it from a long-term perspective. But at the end of the day, they as well, they are paid and incentivized on short term. That's life. It's the profit part of triple bottom line. So it's our role as GMs as well to come up with new solutions. And for instance, in New York, you have Con Edison, which gives incentives. You have NYSEDA, which is New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. They give incentives up to $2 million. And for instance, the New York Palace, which is a direct competitor of ours, but when it comes to sustainability, there's no competition for me. On the contrary, only best practices. And I asked them if I could mention that whenever I speak, and they approved it. And they're going to go into cogen, which is a combined generation. You know, they're going to reduce their energy purchase by 43%. And to do that, they're going to have, you know, as many machines as necessary. And NYSERDA is going to pay 50% of the investment. So at the end of the day, they have almost a 3-year return on investment. And by the way, they reduce their carbon footprint enormously. So I think, you know, you have to be very, very creative. And the other part I wanted to say as well that you have to prove to owners is that it does develop revenue. When I was still at the Willard, because we communicated more, I've not started that at the Barclay because I don't like this greenwashing thing as well, so I want to wait another year or two maybe. But at the Willard, in 2009, out of a total revenue of $65 million, $1 million was really coming thanks to the fact that we were sustainable, that we had this strategy. We had companies like Procter & Gamble. They chose the Willard versus other hotels because we were sharing the same culture. It was very important for them to organize their board meeting and show their board members that when they travel, they choose the right partner. So now I'd like to start the Q&A question-answer session. And for both panels, we'll have a mic for the answers. Who wants to start? Yes. Maybe just, you know, in view of time as well, if someone has other questions, if you want to sort of pile up behind him or line up.
Hi, my name is Jin, and I'm a sophomore in the undergrad program. My question's directed to the first panel and the first part of that discussion. What examples of renewable energy have you seen besides solar and wind in the industry, and which ones are you most enthusiastic about?
Would you like to answer? Could we have there's a mic.
Dueling microphones here. So there's a lot of interesting things that are on the horizon. I think fuel cell technology is beginning to emerge. The scale of and cost of fuel cell technology is beginning to be reduced, so we could see a broader range of applications. I think what's more interesting too is battery technology. Battery technology, there have been tremendous advances in the reliability and the performance and the lifetime capacity of batteries, and also the size of batteries. So that what we could see is, for example, solar panels, as everyone knows, don't work on a cloudy day, but if you had a battery source to save that energy on the sunny days so you could use it on the cloudy days, the effectiveness and then the payback of those solar panels becomes much, much lower. And the effectiveness becomes much higher, so the return on investment is much quicker and much higher. So I think that we're seeing a lot of these kind of technologies. I think the bigger issue, though, is getting away from building or site-specific renewable energy sources and looking at district and neighborhood level kind of distributed generation use of renewable technologies, because there's a lot of inefficiencies of putting windmills or wind turbines or solar panels on individual buildings because of the discrepancy in use patterns across different buildings. So I think that's also the next big horizon in terms of how to use those renewable sources.
Thank you. Next question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dominique, and I'm a freshman in the program. My question is for both panels. What's the restaurant industry doing to expand on sustainable development? Because I noticed that you all talked a lot about the hotels. Do you notice any new up-and-coming trends, or can these same practices that apply to hotels apply to restaurants?
Sustainability, this is the best concept, of course, but it's only focused on ingredients, how to choose the right ingredients. But there is also about energy, about water, infrastructure. So restaurant is also a lot of things, but in terms of ingredient and ecological footprint, the best index can be a solution for chefs. When creating a menu, it's of course better to take farmers closer, to take seasonal product, organic product, because you don't have any pesticides. For products that you cannot find in your country, such as rice, cacao, it's always better to take fair trade. So respecting the best index, it would be one solution. After, for energy, there is technology that we can implement to make the whole restaurant more sustainable.
In terms of cuisine, I think there's been a growing underground, almost cult following on farm-to-table and nose-to-tail cuisine. I don't know how that will translate in terms of masses, but currently I think in the food world, especially in major urban areas, there's a big farm-to-table and nose-to-tail foodie scene, if you want to, yeah.
Social networking as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, in the restaurant industry, I came across a very interesting experiment. It's electrolyzed water. And this is a new technology which would have absolutely no chemical components, kill germs and bacteria and viruses, being harmless to the bodies, to the human bodies. With that, they can, for example, keep a salad fresh for about 3 days. So it helps having central kitchen and then organizing the logistics to the main street restaurants with one central point, with very good preservation of the freshness of the product without having any chemical and any footprint on the food. So technology can help sometimes in that direction.
Thank you. If I may add to that, there's a green restaurant certification which exists now in this country. I don't know if it's expanding internationally. And as well, on Monday, we just heard that now there are standards for green meetings, which were published, which are going to be published actually this month. And you can find them on internet mid-month, November, I mean almost now. So for people to organize meetings, and it will go from booking the meeting to transportation to anything up to accommodations. They've not done the accommodations yet. So they're enticing customers to request green meetings or green restaurants now. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Kelly. I'm a transfer student to the program, the undergraduate program. Buying locally and fair trade ingredients and doing sort of more sustainable practices is also more expensive. How can you remain sustainable and buy locally and still make a profit in your business, whether it be in a restaurant or in a hotel?
Yeah.
Of course, a best lunch, a best meal will be sometime, not always, but sometime, often, more expensive. You're right. So for this, there is two solutions. Either you sell more expensive, so maybe you're going to lose some customer, or you reduce down the profit. This is what happened at THL. We thought, okay, we're going to make best meal at the practical restaurant and at the food court. But if we're too expensive, nobody will buy our meal, so it's useless to make it. So EHL make the right decision to decrease slightly their profit in order to keep the same price as before, but with a best meal. Nowadays, if organic food is not that much developed in the restaurant industry, it's because of this issue, because it's much more expensive. But you know how is economy? If everybody buy more and more that kind of product, if the demand increases, the price will decrease. And this is what happened for some products. And you even have some products less expensive when you buy it locally. But this is a work to make when you purchase. So at school, we're very lucky to have a very strong purchasing department. So they can do the search work to find the right purchaser. If you have the habit to buy the, I don't know, the chicory in Spain, for us in Switzerland, okay, we always buy from this supplier, so we will keep doing this. But if you make this work of search, we finally find that we can have chicory very close to Lausanne for even a price less expensive. So this is all about search. But yeah, the budget thing stay a big issue.
I also think part of that is a stigma that we hold with, greener eating. I know at Newman's, we broke down some of our most popular dishes with the executive chef. And there was just this, I guess, systemic idea in our heads that our clients wanted white meat chicken breast all the time. Like, it's so popular, they must love it, so we shouldn't change because that's just how we've been doing things. But we found out that it's actually much more cost effective if we bought chickens as whole and broke them down ourselves and just found more creative ways to use the rest of the chicken. And the clients were very receptive to that idea. And yes, it's, I guess, easier and more aesthetically appealing maybe to just see a piece of white meat chicken breast on the dish, but it doesn't mean we couldn't find creative ways to use the chicken as a whole. Just a small example, I guess.
Thank you. Eric, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just one thing to also consider. I mean, let's not forget about the guest experience and how we're talking about being able to add art and flair and so forth. I mean, I was at a restaurant the other day where it was the nose to tail, and so everything but of the pig except the squeal. So they had but the way they told the story of how the two brothers who owned the restaurant had done this search and how they would have to be creative to have menu items for this animal that ran out and how everything was local. I mean, the way they told the story and the way they presented the guest experience really added value to the restaurant. And so, it's a different approach, but that's something that you can never forget about is how can local, organic, and everything related to that add value to the guest experience.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cindy. I'm in my third year at the President Tisch Center. And my question is for the first panelist on their issue of fracking. I was wondering, do you guys think fracking will have positive impact in the industry? And because a lot of critics said if it's done properly, it can reduce a lot of CO2 and CO emission and create more local jobs. And I was wondering if this can be done properly, can it be also done in developing countries as well?
I think the cracking, the natural gas, is probably one of the easiest way to meet the gap between the traditional polluting energies and until we are ready with renewables. But there are some difficulties. If you take, for example, the case of Switzerland, they have decided to get out of nuclear power. And we had 60% of our electricity energy needs out of hydro and 40% out of nuclear. And the question is, how do you move from the one to the other? 40%, it's just impossible to do through renewable energies. And I'd like to link to the other question, which was, what are the other sources? So apart from solar and wind, basically wind you would have, for example, in Europe, in the North Sea, and solar you would have in Spain, South Italy, and, for example, there is a huge project, Desertec, in the Sahara. In the US, you will have solar more in Arizona and Texas and in Mexico, and you would have the wind more on, again, on the coasts or on the mountains. In Asia, you will have solar in the Gobi Desert, but, for example, not in the mainland China. So we need alternative. One of the key alternatives will be geothermic. This could be cost benefit, but there's always a risk of digging about 3,000 deep. And if you do that close to a city, you may generate, which has happened a few times, earthquakes. So that's the problem. And the person who takes that decision after having invested 2 or 3 billion and have to stop the thing because of an earthquake risk, it's huge. But this potential of geothermic is very huge. And the question is, how do you meet the gap until you're ready? And probably only natural gas would do it. So there is a huge technological issue about cracking because it might be a bit impure. So it's better to go for absolutely pure natural gas. But again, you create emissions. It's cheaper and it's cleaner than coal and petrol, but it is not renewable. So what we try and see in that industry is, as long as you have the power, I'm sorry to say, of the lobbies, of the petrol lobby, of the atomic energy lobby in certain countries, you will not be able to really develop the alternative energies. And gas might be the interim measure. And what is needed is to create a quantum leap, a change of terms of reference, so that we really enter into those renewable in a big way. And to do that, there is no other way than to have a strong involvement by the governments. If not, the markets, the private sector economy will not do the move. Only if new paradigms, new rules, new obligations are fixed by the political power, the private sector will follow. And gas might be the in-between.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Davlatcho. I'm a first-year graduate student tourism management. And my question is to the first panel. Professor Begley earlier have mentioned about paying for the waste and for individuals paying for the waste and carbon footprint emissions. The question is, what are the, can you exemplify what are the regulations with the payment? Where do the funds go? How do they benefit? And who decides on the distribution of this money? This is the question. Yeah, thank you.
I'll try to be short. 2 elements of answer. One, local community normally are the ones deciding how they pay for the waste. And they really pay something to get it for getting rid of the waste. Two, the waste becomes a resource. If you have biomass installations, very often the problem is they have not enough waste in a constant flow in order to make the biomass installation profitable. You can transform, for example, plastic. Today, local communities, city regulation might pay for plastic. But plastic can be used for redoing petrol. Or dead wood can be very much used for recreating energy. Once you have a multi-million, normally a plant would be $60 to $80 million. Once you have invested into a waste processing plant back to energy, well, then the waste start having a value because you need it for ensuring the return of investment of your plant. And the risk is the local collectivity pays less and your discounted cash flow might be completely destabilized by the fact that the raw material which the local collectivity tried to get rid of initially becomes a resource and the price is moving up. And this is one of the major challenges in that sector.
Thank you. Last question. Oh, last before last.
My name's Kevin White. I'm an adjunct professor at Tisch. We're talking about a very big subject here, which is a paradigm shift of thought for a lot of people, because we realize that we've dealt with one part of the triumvirate of sustainability, which is the economics. So it's been driving everything, and we're now trying to push people to think of the other two pieces, people and planet. I've heard a lot of great things about what's needed, and to me, there's always several elements to it. Mining data, which is getting the right information. You can't come up with anything or tell people what to do if you don't have correct information. Then it's developing a plan based on that, but then it's changing the minds, hearts, and or passion of people to actually make it happen. These things happen in very small pieces and can happen locally a lot, which they are doing. There's so many groups that are forming every year that I see out there with the name Green and sustainability. But does anybody know or see, or could they think of one group, because the efficiency of this effort really needs to happen with some coordinated oversight of some sort. And there are so many different groups and so many interests, but is there one entity that people see? You know, my first thought is United Nations, but I don't think that they have the power or the ability to do it. But is there a group like that, or an entity that anyone sees as taking the forefront in coordinating this effort? Because 1,000 voices are great, but 1,000 voices focused in one direction is even better.
Again, I think the formation of this new Global Tourism Sustainable Council in Washington, D.C. is going to help, but it's just started in April. But the lady that's heading that up was head of the Green Globe, and she's had lots and lots of experience and came from Australia. So I'm hoping that this makes a big difference. But again, just the differences in our industry, that we're going to be focusing much more on the tourism issues, but not necessarily the hotel issues, as I understand, within that organization. So once these are developed, I'm hoping that then we have a meeting maybe next year at this time and we look how these two interact. Because the hotel industry already has a lot of their guidelines, a lot of their measurements. It's totally new in this other area. Yeah. But
that's the answer I would have given as well,
yeah.
being on the board of the GSTC.
And I think he should speak to this because he's on the board and he's also on a couple of the committees.
But I'm just supposed to direct questions.
No, but would you ask that question?
I have my lead.
Okay.
Yeah, being on the board of Global Sustainable Tourism Council, the aim of our board and our mission is actually to become the overarching program under which, sort of a big umbrella, under which every certification in the world could sort of put themselves, you know, I mean, being recognized, being approved, and then being accredited. But we are really just at the first step. We actually were created after 10 years of infancy. After 10 years of infancy, with founders like United Nations Environmental Program, UNEP, United Nations World Tourism Organization, United Nations Foundation, Ted Turner, and many other companies like Sabre and major global companies as well. After 10 years of infancy, we were created last July. We actually were born in August of 2010. So it's really the first steps at the moment. We have criteria for hotels and tour operators. And we're going to eventually have criteria for all other sectors all other segments of the industry, airlines, cruise lines, attraction parks as well. And then we're working as well, parallel to that, we're working on destinations, and I really believe in that. For instance, recently I've approached Rio de Janeiro. You know, they're going to have this big meeting, Rio +20, then they have the Olympics, then they have the World Cup or reverse. And they're very interested in sustainability, and we would love to have them as you know, sort of our first, not guinea pigs, but our first customer, and really sort of make them really look, you know, super sustainable when they approach this type of events. Dr. Begley, you wanted to add?
Yeah. It's really great that you have that umbrella organization. Here I'd like to give a word of pessimism. Well, by nature I'm an optimist, but the risk is all that takes time, all that takes too much time versus the need to act fast to build the infrastructures of the future. I'm now not referring exactly and exclusively to tourism and hospitality, but globally. We spoke about solar and wind new energies. If you do that, you have to redesign fundamentally the electricity grid of the US and the European and elsewhere. Because so far the electricity grid is built in such a way that you have a few power plants and they would go with high voltage to central lines, then you go down to medium stream, and then you go down to low voltage, and it goes to your house. If tomorrow there are millions of houses which have a small wind farm, it's possible to have that even at the house level, not only the super big ones. And if you have millions of houses with a roof with solar panels, it changes completely the way how the electricity will be injected into the grid. And you have to have dozens of billions of dollars investment to re-infrastructure the grid. And the minimum time to do that is 20 years. Equally, there was a very good comment about the batteries. The key problem will be how you store the energy. Now, batteries today are lithium. Lithium is becoming a very rare raw material, which is available in two, let's say, unstable countries, Colombia and Bolivia, plus China. If tomorrow you would have civil wars in the Andes, and if China would block the access to lithium, then the whole problem, how do you store the energy, becomes the next challenge. So all of that implies, and the question is absolutely spot on, a central regulating body. UN would be the right place, but it's far too weak to impose and implement. So I think if industries, in that case our industry, which is one of the leading ones, agrees on standards and tries to not only think about but impose and show the way, it would be absolutely fundamental, because there must be very clear signs for the infrastructure to be introduced and invested. It takes minimum 20 years until we are there. And probably in 20 years, the challenges will be already quite different. So we need strong leadership.
Yeah, I think that the umbrella concept actually is contradictory to what somewhat sustainable development is going in terms of decentralization. You talk about, well, you have to have wind in the north, solar in the south, localized economies for local food purchasing. So there's actually a lot of talk toward decentralization in general, a lot of different things. And there's so many different issues that in respective areas, a lot of stuff is popping up. But can the GSTC solve everything? Probably not, but for certain things. But there's a lot of different organizations out there that are working in the respective areas, I think, that you can look to. I mean, look at the Sustainability Consortium for products. I think that's a really interesting one. Look at the International Integrated Reporting Committee for integrated financial and non-financial reporting. You look at the Carbon Measurement Working Group through WTTC and ITP for measuring carbon in the hotel industry. So I think there's, in each respective area, there's a lot of the Water Footprint Network for water. I mean, there's a lot of different stuff for different areas and different topics. And that really, the synergies of all those are probably going to work a lot better than one over-encompassing body trying to solve for everything at once, because it will probably take too much time.
Thank you. Maybe last question.
Thank you very much, Yvette. My question is partially by way of observation, and I do, as Claude has said, try to keep it short. First is a joint success, if you like, between my family and NYU. At NYU, my eldest child, Florentina, and then my eldest son, Andrew, followed. Florentina would regularly take us to Hayden, which is a hall of residence where they offer organic food. And there was no way she was going to let us out of dining at NYU without going to Hayden. So I'm sorry about all the others. So I'm developing business for you here. But going on from that, she's actually got on. She did a master's program, came out at the age of 21, and eventually joined the UN at the age of 23, which is the earliest age you can join them. She's now working with the Food Security Division based at FAO in Rome. So again, thank you, NYU. And she's going for her 5th time to Bangladesh in the past year, implementing programs over there, which helps Bangladesh develop its own programs. I have too many hats here, perhaps, to feel comfortable. My second question is, or observation is, as a hotelier. In my time, we've seen the development of a funny title to chefs and restaurant managers. It was called the Food and Beverage Manager. It came out of this country, I think, a little bit north of here. And we started paying fortunes for food and beverage managers. We also saw back-of-house managers as a defined term. It seems we need a specific term for sustainability managers, if that's what you would like to call them. Perhaps it should be eco-manager. I mean, it needs a buzzword to really make it sexy, as we would say. And I put that question to you as a panel as to what would be the best title. My third observation is the question of how you implement, because this all seems to be about implementation. If you want to achieve something, you have to be able to implement it. And the balance is between, shall I call it Wall Street, and government bodies. And if you will, a combination of the success of that was going down to my marriage and wedding in Sicily, in Europe. I passed through a wonderful home that had just been completed by some friends of my godfather, forgive me. It was a Swiss home just south of Zurich, and they completed it, and we were amazed. We were eventually allowed to see the basement level of this home. And it was then, back in, what are we now, 1980s, that every home had to have its own shelter, its own bomb shelter, in the event of nuclear war. And this is a wonderful example of compulsory implementation of a program. Going on down to Sicily, I couldn't believe it. A few years ago I was there, and out of nowhere I'd suddenly see a wind turbine. And good Lord, there's another one about 5 miles away, not 6 together, but individually in different areas. And I said, well, who's funding this wonderful program? Well, in point of fact, it's the EU budget, and it's a way that I use the word mafia, has actually found out a way of getting a good source of funds to keep themselves going and develop a local product. I thought, what extraordinary success. And so that, if you like, are the two sides of how to make it happen. But I'd be grateful for your guidance as to how further we can make it happen, because sustainability is a long word, not particularly sexy, and we do need a buzzword, and I'd be grateful for your suggestions as to how to go about that.
Maybe a title? We're looking for a title?
Well,
so may I just add one further point? Sorry about this. Meat as opposed to vegetables. Companies like Monsanto, and again, it was my daughter that made us go and see Fast Food Nation and Food Inc. and Supersize It and all these wonderful movies that basically kill the meat industry dead because of the way they treat us. It is a fact that if we all ate vegetarian, we would have 7 times the amount of food on the planet, and within a year we would have sorted out Africa's and Asia's food problems. And it's how to get that into an education program, another of my hats, because I did go to Lausanne. You need to teach people how to make vegetarian food sexy in restaurants. I want to see 50% vegetarian, of which perhaps 20% is vegan, and then 50% meat. And if you can achieve that in a luxury hotel, which is what I've known most of my life, then I think we're getting somewhere. Over to you.
Thank you.
I was going to answer towards the first part of your question. I agree, sustainability is a very wide topic right now. So at Cushman & Wakefield, while we have to use it because it is what the market knows, we're also trending towards calling ourselves energy analysts, environmental analysts, targeting on the specific product that we work on. So I believe while sustainability is going to remain the umbrella term, by targeting the specific product that you work on, you can actually affect more change that way.
So, I mean, eventually we're probably going to see a chief sustainability officer top level of a company, and that's, I mean, it's pretty much the way IT sort of happened, and some companies treat it as intelligence, some as a department that permeates, but that's one. If you want to get, the new buzz, we have the creating shared value, so the shared value creator term would probably be a pretty cool one.
Actually, there are already a vice president of sustainability, corporate responsibility, and we have 2 hotels in New York, the New York Palace and the Grand Hyatt, which have a director of sustainability in-house as well, which, very...
Also, look at the General Services Administration. My former boss at Cushman & Wakefield went over there as the chief greening officer. So sustainability wasn't, don't call her the chief sustainability officer, but chief greening. And it's very much the same term, but is even more widely accepted amongst the industry.
Just to answer your question about the implementation, I mean, I won't go through the whole detail because we should close now, but it has to start from the top. The CEO, the chairman, the board, the general manager of the hotel must be committed. If it doesn't start there, it will not work. It's not going to be implemented. The chief engineer can come and see the GM, but if the GM doesn't sign the purchase orders to buy CFLs or LED bulbs, it won't work. The other points I would like to make is what's important, I've practiced it, is to create a roadmap. At the level of a hotel, a 5-year roadmap is fine. At the level of a company, a 10-year roadmap. But to really give yourself and your team measurements and targets as well to achieve. And you can change them year after year, that's not the issue, but really just be focused on this roadmap as well. And of course, measurements are extremely important. So all this being said, we'd like to thank you, great questions, and thanks the panelists, the first and the second panel. I really enjoyed my time here for the first time, it was great. And I hope you enjoyed too, and that you'll take a lot of things away. Thank you.